This special study session of the Amador County Unified School District and the Amador County Transportation Commission to order. I'm Jim Whitaker, I'm the board clerk. I am subbing for Julia Burns, who cannot make it today. And make sure you speak loudly. Second roll has been taken, so please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, with that being said, we're going to open it up for public comments. The person wishing to be heard by the board shall first be recognized by the president and shall proceed to comment as briefly as the subject permits. Individual speakers shall be allowed 3 minutes to address the board on an agenda item. The board shall limit the total time for public input on each item to 20 minutes. With board consent, the board president may increase or decrease the time allotted for public presentation, depending upon the topic and the number of persons wishing to speak, wishing to be heard. The president may take a poll of speakers The president may take a roll of speakers for or against a particular issue and may ask additional persons to speak only if they have something new to add. Note, if you wish to address the board, please complete a speaker card and give it to the executive assistant. And it looks right now that we have 2 speaker cards. And we will start with, and you'll have to excuse me on the name because I had cataract surgery last week, and writing of names, so it may be difficult. So if I butcher your name, please forgive me. Tom Du Bois?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where do you want me to stand here?
Yeah,
Stand.
that's
So Tom Du Bois, City Manager, Sutter Creek. Just wanted to call attention to the elementary pickup. So I think there's significant growth at the elementary school, and a lot of parents, they park their cars and go to get their kids, and it's already a situation where people are parking in no parking areas. So I think there needs to be some solution for pickup at the elementary school. Potentially you could use that lower lot at the high school for parent parking. And also, I think Sutter Creek would also like to see you study the intersections around Spanish Street, Old 49, Sutter Island Road, Highway 49. And just one other item for consideration, there's that freeway stop between the elementary school and the high school. And potentially a roundabout there could make drop off much easier. The circulation works pretty well. Then you get cars stopping at the stop sign and a roundabout, I think allows for continuous flow. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. The next card that I have is Mr. Cody Gold.
Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today and see this much needed meeting taking place. Yesterday I received a message from the district regarding an incident that had taken place earlier in the day. The last paragraph led off with the following statement.
Excuse me, Mr. Gold,
Yes.
is this related to the EIR?
It is.
Okay.
It is. The last paragraph led off the following statement. As always, our priority is always safety, as always student and staff safety. Thus far in the EIR process, this does not appear to be the case. District staff has continuously cited what the CEQA process requires or doesn't require you to do. They keep falling back on your bare minimum legal obligations, but that doesn't mean you don't have a moral and ethical obligation to identify and mitigate safety concerns. District staff also likes to repetitively bring up that you didn't have to do a level of service traffic study since CEQA doesn't require it, but you chose to go above and beyond and include it. It is concerning that you've chosen to have this study conducted, but then appear to have no intent to mitigate the findings. This is worse than not having done the study at all. No longer can you claim ignorance. You sought out the information, you've been properly informed and educated, but now have no intention of mitigating the problems you are fully aware of. This doesn't seem like an approach of an organization whose priority is always the safety of staff and students. The focus thus far has been on one major intersection, but I believe there are other traffic impacts that have not been discussed yet. On an afternoon in December, driving between Martell and Ione, I passed 118 cars, semis, dump trucks, buses, box trucks, all coming at me at speeds varying from 50 to 70 miles per hour. Between the Ion Junior High and my home, I passed 2 cars at 25 miles per hour. It doesn't take a mathematician to know that the odds of one of my children being involved in a significant accident increased astronomically by requiring them to be on Highway 88 twice a day, 5 days a week, for the entire school year for 2 more years of their school career than they already have to now. In fact, as a first responder, my first ever in this community, my first ever fatality accident I responded to involved a family heading to Argonaut High School in the morning for school drop-off. And the only accident I've ever been involved in as a driver occurred my senior year on Highway 88, also in the morning heading to Argonaut. This is an unacceptable level of risk when you consider 30% of the ACUSD population resides in the Ion area, and there are alternative solutions to the current plan that could avoid that many students having to navigate the dangerous 104-88 intersection and the lower end of Highway 88 daily. I ask that you listen to the concerns of the ACTC, Caltrans, members of the public, and work with these agencies to make sure that our kids are as safe as they possibly can be when traveling to and from school. Thank you.
Having no other cards, we'll go ahead and close the public comment, and we'll go right to our agenda item, Amador County Transportation Commission. So, turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. John Gedney, I'm the Executive Director of the Amador County Transportation Commission. We've spoken on numerous...
Actually, can we have everybody do introductions?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm
going to do that right now.
Okay, good.
I'm going to introduce our team right now.
Oh, that'd be great.
Great. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our team. You've heard from me on numerous occasions at board meetings, at Board of Supervisors meetings and school district meetings. So let me introduce our team that's been here today. We're very excited to have this opportunity to finally discuss this in an open forum and full disclosure. And I'd like to actually ask the time constraints. We don't have time constraints on our discussion today? Or do we?
No.
Oh, great.
No,
Okay.
because it's an agendized item and we're getting
Perfect.
input from you. You are not limited to 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. You take a deep breath and just discuss things.
We want to hear everything that
Oh,
you have to
wonderful.
say. Oh, great.
I'd like to introduce our chair. Our ACTC chair this year is County Supervisor Pat Crew. Morning. Next to Pat is our legal counsel, Olivia Clark. To my right is Mayor Jackson Steve McLean. He's our vice chair of the ACTC. Former Supervisor John Flass, public member of the ACTC Commissioner. Dan Reardon, City Council member from Sutter Creek, ACTC Commissioner. And City Council member Susan Bragstad from Amador City, ACTC Commissioner. We also have Don Hubbard, our traffic consultant. He has a presentation that we'd like to present to you at your pleasure. I'd like to receive that. We also have in attendance Chuck Beatty, County Planning Director, and Richard Vella, County Public Works Director. I think that is the extent of our team right here. If you'd like to introduce yours as well.
Yeah, I'll just have our
Okay,
go ahead.
I'm Jim Whitaker. I'm District Board Representative, Board Clerk.
I'm Janae Vellani with Lozano Smith, Legal Counsel for the district.
Tori Gibson, I'm the Superintendent of Amador County Unified School District and the Amador County Office of Education.
And I'm Jared Critchfield, I'm Deputy Superintendent for the schools.
Shane Crowe, District 1 Representative.
Kayla Parker, District 2 Representative.
James Marzano, District 3 Upcountry.
Dwayne Ernst with PlaceWorks, an environmental consultant to the school district.
Mariana Zimmerman, also with PlaceWorks.
Mimi David Fancy, school facility consultant for the district.
Okay, that seems to be everything.
All right.
And I'm sorry for...
Great. So yeah, your pleasure on how you'd like to proceed. We actually would like to get into the technical analysis. I'm not, maybe not be the right forum, but we have a presentation from our traffic consultant. And as an overview, I think you've heard it before, but I think Cody actually encapsulated our position very well in his public comment. I don't think I need to reiterate our position. So if, without your objection, I would ask that we have Don Hubbard make his presentation. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me talk about traffic. I know it's not everybody's fun thing, but I really get into it. Next slide, please. So I've got 4 topics for today. It's going to take about 15 or 20 minutes. I want to talk about traffic safety issues. Then I want to talk about VMT threshold that was used in the DEIR and the mitigation measures that are also part of the DEIR. And then what it is ACTC is asking for. So with that, let's get into the safety issues. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide, please. So the DEIR does not address the issues of traffic safety. It just doesn't. And I think that this may be in the mistaken belief that that's not a CEQA issue, when in fact it is. The SB 743, so that was a law that was passed in 2013, came into effect a couple of years ago, that says traffic level of service is no longer an impact under CEQA, and it had been. And this was a sea change, because for decades, that had been what traffic impacts were measured by. Now they do it by vehicle miles traveled. So it's the total number of trips you generate times their distance. And so when they made that change, some people believe, okay, now you just study VMP and you're done. That is not the case. So it says, this subdivision does not relieve a public agency of the requirement to analyze a project's potentially significant transportation impacts related to air quality, noise, safety, or any other impact. So the fact that they made that one change on one metric doesn't get rid of the other metrics. You still have to do that stuff. So the EIR must address traffic safety impacts. This has been pointed out by multiple agencies on multiple occasions. It's clear as bell. Next slide, please. So what did the EIR do? Well, Caltrans sent a comment letter to the notice of preparation. So before you did the DIR, they sent a comment letter that says, we think that there are queuing issues related to safety at 3 particular intersections. And they were talking about the 3 intersections most impacted by the project that are on the state highway system. Those are the roads the state's responsible for. There are other roads that are off the state highway system in Sutter Creek and other places that local agencies have concerns that they have raised about. So there are a number of issues. So the DEIR traffic consultant did perform an operation analysis at a number of intersections, including the 3 cited by Caltrans. However, this analysis was not incorporated into the body of the DEIR and is instead in an appendix that is described as being for informational purposes only, so it was not an impact analysis. They kind of did it, and by the way, what they did the level of service stuff, which is not what was asked for. The Caltrans asked for a safety analysis, and they did a level of service impact analysis. So they did the one thing that CEQA says you don't have to do. So no safety impact analysis was done. The wording in the DEIR implies that the reason was they thought they only had to do the VMP stuff. And if you here's a quote from the EIR: level of service is no longer used as a measure of transportation impacts under CEQA. Transportation impacts in the following analysis will instead be evaluated based on a project's effect on VMP. They thought that that one change meant that's what they had to study. True, they have to study that, but other stuff. Do you have a question?
Sir, when you say they, who are you referring to?
Your traffic consultant.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So why is Caltrans and ACTC worried about queuing? Why is that a safety issue? Queuing isn't called out in CEQA as a particular issue. Well, the issue is that if a project lengthens the queues at key intersections, the queues may extend past the existing turning pockets and into the travel lanes. So if you look, for example, at the Argonaut Lane intersection, there's what's called the turn pocket. So somebody making a left turn gets out of the main travel lane, they're in a safe turn pocket, right? That's good. So, but if you add a bunch of traffic and the queue on that now fills that turn pocket and people start queuing up on the travel lane where people are going 45 miles an hour and quite a bit higher, frankly, you can see why you created a safety issue. Even with no physical change in the location, by the effect of your project is to create a brand new safety hazard that did not exist before. That's a CEQA issue for sure. Besides that, drivers get impatient in long queues, and they start to engage in risky behavior as a result. People have waited a long time, and you've all seen it. Somebody's going to tell you, hey, I'm just going to cut the queue. I'm going to drive on the embankment on the side to get around it. Or they're going to go into the opposing traffic and see if they can make a left turn before it's their turn. And we're talking about inexperienced high school drivers. So the most dangerous set of drivers, you're creating a safety hazard, and then who's it affecting? The least experienced drivers in your community. Next slide, please. So there was some queuing stuff done. It's in your level of service analysis. So the Caltrans comment letter on your notice of preparation, again, this was before you even did the EIR, requested that the intersection analysis be done using SimTraffic, which is the industry standard software, and it's the one that Caltrans uses, and it requires statewide, this is what they want you to use. That's not what they did. They used another software package. So I had my staff do a little spot check on one intersection. Does it make any difference? Sure, it turns out it makes a big difference. So what's shown on the left is what was in your EIR. What's shown on the right is if you use the software that Caltrans asked them to use, and you see the results are very, very different. You can see that in one case, at this intersection, there's a queue of 880 feet. That's more than 40 vehicles. At which point, for sure, teenage drivers are going to start doing their own solutions, whatever that happens to be. So again, if they had just done what had been asked, none of these issues would have shown up. Next slide, please. That's not the only strange thing about the queuing analysis that was done. When they analyzed the vehicle miles traveled, your consultant looked at the home locations, home addresses of the students, and where the locations of the schools they would be traveling to, and they used that for the analysis, which is fine. That's a reasonable way of doing it. But then when they did the queuing analysis, they didn't do that. Instead, as you can show here, they just factored up the existing volumes. So why is that a problem? Well, the issue is that the vehicular traffic going to and from this is what they said. Vehicular traffic going to and from the schools are distributed at each intersection according to the turning movement proportions consistent with the existing counts. So they're taking the existing traffic, not what's going to happen when you do your project, where traffic is going to be coming from a different direction. And as a result, their queuing analysis, even one they did, which had problems anyway, underestimated the impact of the project on the turning movements most affected. They spread them all out, rather than saying, you now have a bunch more traffic coming from a particular direction, so you're going to have a longer queue from that direction. So even in itself, it was an underestimate. Next slide, please. So why did Caltrans pick out these three intersections? Are they just imagining that there's a safety problem? And the answer is no. There's real evidence that there are safety issues here. So 49 in Argonaut Lane, 38 collisions in the last 10 years, including a fatality. 38's a lot. Okay, everybody in this community knows that. 9 of those, about a third of them, a quarter of them, occurred on school days around the start and end time of the Argonaut High School. So we looked at the start and closing dates of school, times of school, half an hour before, half an hour with. I'm seeing a connection there. Maybe there isn't. It's not. You'd have to go into each of the individual collisions. But there's definitely fair argument that there is a safety issue here related to this high school. And if you go there, you've all been past there. As you go northbound on Argonaut Lane, there's an embankment on both sides that kind of creates a sight distance issue. You've got a curve. You've got people going well over the speed limit there. There's a number of issues here. Next slide, please. So what about on Hoffman Street? 11 collisions in the last 10 years, again a fatality. About half of those are at school opening and closing times. You can see here there's a sight distance problem. So if you look at figure A, you can see that white building, which you can also see on the right, is really blocking the view of what's coming down Hoffman Street. And you've got a grade issue, they're coming downhill anyway. There's a problem at this intersection. You don't want to make it worse. And again, this is an existing problem, and we'll get into that. Next slide, please. This is at Sutter Street, this is right in front of this building, 19 collisions, again including fatality. So there have been fatal collisions at all 3 of the intersections that Caltrans has asked you to study. Yes, sir.
Sutter Street, that's the one with the light,
Yes.
so it has a light and it's.
So it has, right, that one has been improved.
And it's existing.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
How long has the light been there, that light?
That's not a question I can answer.
About 10 to 12 years.
Okay.
6 years. Yeah, I was gonna say, there was a
5 or
blinking
6
light
years.
before.
There was a blink, I was gonna do something
Yeah,
like, okay.
and then an actual light, like 6 years.
Okay.
Okay, so when Caltrans wrote your letter saying, we have concerns about these 3 particular places, those concerns were well-founded. These were not imaginary, they're real. Next slide, please. So, okay, all that's the safety issue. I think we can go into the details on that after I finish. Let's talk about the vehicle miles traveled threshold that they used. Next slide, please. So why thresholds matter? EIRs have a number of purposes, but one of them is they're an informational document as well as a policy document. So the first requirement of an EIR is that you have to disclose the impacts, even if you're going to have a statement of overriding considerations later. The first thing I have to do is explain to the public what's going on and then what you're going to do about it or not. So thresholds are used to help policymakers and the public gauge the extent of an impact. An improperly lax threshold misleads the reader by understating the severity. So if your doctor tells you, hey, the potassium in your blood is 0.7 milligrams, per liter, you don't know what that means, right? Unless you've got a threshold. Is that a high number, low number, whatever? So the threshold is part of the information as whether or not there's a problem. So if you don't put a threshold or you mess it up, you are giving a misleading statement as to what's actually going on. And note that even if you have a threshold, that's not the end of the story under CEQA. Per CEQA guidelines, and this is new when they did SB 743, compliance with a threshold does not relieve its lead agency of the obligation to consider substantial evidence indicating that the project's environmental effects may still be significant. So even if you have a threshold under VMT and you meet that threshold, that doesn't give you the opportunity of saying, we're not going to study other stuff, like all those safety issues that we just raised. You would still have to do it, you're still obliged to do it. Next slide, please. So what was your threshold? It said, and here's your EIR, there are no established significance thresholds for school, so this analysis used no increase in the VMT per student for the impact criteria. That's it, that's all they said. Nothing about where the origin of this threshold, no substantial evidence to support it, which is required under CEQA. Why did you use this and not something else? Note this, and even in itself, the threshold completely omits consideration of all the other traffic that's associated with the schools. The parents, school employees, vendors, people who attend sporting events that are also affected by the project. So even in itself, it was only telling part of the story. And then even in itself, just the part of the story it told, student VMT didn't really get it right. Okay, and the reason I say that is the state's greenhouse gas goals require a reduction in VMT for projects going forward. Business as usual is no longer good enough. That's what got us into the problem in the first place. You have to show a reduction or show why you're not having a reduction. So what the state's statewide goal is a 15% reduction in VMT. So they can't do anything about projects that already exist. But projects going forward are held to a higher standard because now we need communities that produce less VMT. So this threshold really doesn't cut it. Next slide, please. Then let's get to the mitigation after you've done the impact analysis. Next slide, please. The proposed mitigation section simply states that at some unknown point in the future, the district will create a transportation demand management plan. Okay, a plan is not a mitigation because it doesn't do anything in the field. All you're really saying is we'll figure it out later. So that defers identification of mitigation measures, which is not allowed under CEQA. Formulation of mitigation measures shall not be deferred to some future time. What is it that you're going to do? You have to tell us in the EIR. You are allowed to defer if the agency, under certain conditions, if the agency commits itself to a mitigation and adopts specific performance standards that the mitigation will achieve. Your EIR didn't do either. So if you say, we're not sure what we're going to do, but we commit to having a 15% reduction, then that's a performance standard you can be measured against. Okay? And you have to say, and here's the sort of things we're going to do. We're going to do increased bus usage or increased bike and ped or something else. But you have to have a performance thing. You can't say, well, I'll figure it out later and whatever it is we do is going to be good enough because we're not measuring against anything. This is, a fatal flaw. Next slide, please. And there's no reason for you to put this off because there's all sorts of help available to help you identify appropriate mitigation measures. Here's something done by COE, that's the California Air Pollution Officers Association. They produced this handbook. It's got more than 100 pages of transportation mitigations, including data that would help you to figure out to quantify the effect. So if you did carpooling, how much your VMT might decrease. If you did increase buses, how much it might decrease. And so you could actually quantify it and say, here is what our project's impacts are, and here's our mitigation, and after mitigation, here's how much we've reduced it. That's what you're supposed to do, and there's really no reason you can't do this now. This is not complicated stuff. Next slide, please. So what it is ACTC is asking for. Next slide, please. My understanding is they're not trying to stop your project. Okay? Please, you get that? They really emphasize that and wanted me to emphasize it. They're not trying to stop the project. They just want you to follow the same rules everybody else follows. Anybody else that comes up with a project, you have to do a proper safety analysis and include it in the EIR. You have to identify your mitigation measures, and you have to quantify how much they're going to reduce your impacts. Contribute your fair share to these intersection improvements. And they've got a bunch of stuff that calculates other people's fair share too. Nobody's saying you have to fix this by yourself. And then finally, just work with ACTC and Caltrans to find solutions that'll work for all the parties concerned. They've asked for staff level stuff. I don't know, but that's what they're looking for, to work with your staff and see if they can figure out something that'll work with everybody. Can't speak for Caltrans, but having worked with Caltrans for decades, my assumption is that's what they prefer anyway. Last slide. There was one of the things that they wanted to talk about was there has been some discussion as to whether or not Wicklow Way could be extended to Stony Creek and Hoffman and create a new, much safer entrance into the high school. There's a number of other specific mitigation measures that I think they're going to ask you to look for when they produce their comment letter. And that's really what they're asking. Just work with them, take a look at this stuff. In your EIR, you may agree with the stuff, you may not. But if so, please give a reasoned response why it is you've decided to agree with these, or why it is you think that they're not appropriate or can't be done, or whatever it is. And with that, I'm finished.
Thank you, Don. Very nice.
Mr. Marzano.
I have a question, sir. You kept referring to a letter from Caltrans.
Yes.
When was that sent? And I saw a letter on social media last night. Is that what you're referring to?
I'm sorry,
The-
what was the
the-
question?
The NOP.
Caltrans comment letter?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Caltrans sent a letter that Don mentioned, referred to as the notice of preparation letter that was in response to your disclosure that you were going to do an EIR. And in that letter, they asked you, when you do your EIR, we'd like you to study these particular intersections that Don mentioned. Well, now, after not doing what Caltrans asked you to do, they're sending a comment letter in response to your draft environmental impact report, reiterating that you didn't do what they asked you to do, and they're asking you to do it. And that's a comment letter in response to
When
the
was it
EIR.
sent out?
That was sent out on the 24th of this month, I understand.
The first
We
one.
received a copy from Caltrans. Oh, the first NOP letter was sent November or so, sometime in there.
In that letter, I haven't seen that
I haven't
letter.
seen the letter. I saw something on Facebook, but you know how that goes.
Yeah. In the letter, the original letter sent from Caltrans when they were requesting which intersections to be studied was also, I haven't seen it. In that letter, is there also the request for that specific software
Yes,
that
it
you
was.
put on
Yes.
there? Okay.
And they talked about queuing. That was their concern.
The letter was sent in July.
Of 2023?
23?
Yes.
Okay.
So that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to respond kind of to a global issue. And could you go back to maybe it's slide 3 or so early on? I just want to address this issue about LOS and BMT, and we talked about that at the board. And it is confusing and whatever, but I really want to emphasize that we agree with what is stated here. Here, let's see. Okay. Talking about SB 743, and that this does not relieve us from looking at air quality, noise, safety, or any other impact associated with transportation. We agree with that, and I think our document does that. Now, we can have arguments about how our traffic consultant did certain things, what software it used, whether it went to the degree that Caltrans wanted, or the county wants, or the ACTC wants. We can talk about that. And basically, you know, what we want you to do is submit this as a comment to the draft EIR, and we'll go back to those people, and they will respond to it. But we agree with you. I mean, so that, in terms of this global issue of have we ignored transportation and have we ignored safety issue? Absolutely not. You know, the district wants solutions as well as all of you do.
Well, I hear that response, but it begs the question, then why was the Caltrans letter ignored?
I don't think it wasn't ignored.
Well, on
but
these
but we're
points,
not-
apparently it was.
Well, we're not the traffic
Your folks
consultants.
didn't even see it, that sit on the board.
That's not a function of the board. The notice of preparation letter.
Well, once
was
again,
sent to-
you can minimalize
Let me
how
explain
you're
this.
sharing information.
Hey,
But if your heart is
Excuse
really...
me, let me explain.
I'm sorry.
Give the man the floor. I got 5 words out, please.
So,
I think we received first.
yeah, I thought I
I think
did,
he did
and then
that
you
first,
interject.
actually.
So, do I get to finish what I was saying?
That's fine.
Okay. So my concern is, I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate that. And I believe that you believe you're doing the best you can. But the evidence would indicate otherwise. So far, what I've heard today is that a couple of your trustees have never seen the letter. I understand you're going to talk about why. And it sounds like, well, that's not required. And I've heard that a lot. Certain things are not required. But my point is, if the project and the heart of the project is really to serve the community at its fullest in an open fashion and work collaboratively with partners, then why are we doing the minimum at every point to try to keep certain information out of public awareness?
Mr. Richard.
Thanks, Jerry.
Yep, no problem. So, notice of preparation letters and the whole CEQA process in preparing the report is not a function of the school board. That's a function of the staff. So all of those notice of preparation letters were sent to staff and then given to our consultants, and all were considered in our report. So that's not something where every step of the way we give all the information to the school board, because their job is the what, and it was to consolidate and approve. They approve the process of going through CEQA, but we don't provide them with every letter and update through the entire process. That's not the function of the school board, that's the function of staff.
I appreciate that, Jared, and I understand, and I agree that isn't the function necessarily. However, my point remains that if you're truly trying to educate your trustees to the whole project and all of the risks and all of the community concerns and all of that business, then why not go beyond that and really share the information so that when you come up with solutions, they have the information to be able to evaluate, is it done to your comfort level? Are you really comfortable with this? If they don't know that, they can't respond. It's kind of like your threshold. If you don't have a threshold, how do you know? So although I appreciate that, I've sat on boards and I've been executive director of the hospice for 10 years in Amador County, and I understand how all this works. But in full disclosure, it doesn't look like what I've been saying. This doesn't look like full disclosure to me.
Well, Mr. Reardon, I hear what you're saying. However, if we were to get a copy of every letter, we'd be so inundated, we could not, in my opinion, function as a board to find out what we need to do otherwise.
All due respect, Mr. Whitaker, please don't speak for me, but
I said,
Go ahead.
I said, in my opinion, you know, you may want more information than I do, you know, but the total, if we were to get a copy of every piece of paper that's sent concerning that draft environmental impact report, which is that much, plus the appendices, we would be swimming in information that we may not serve.
Yeah, may I add that all of the NLP letters are in the environmental document. They're in an appendix, and so that was provided to the board. So it's all in there. It's all in there. It was not excluded.
Mr. Marzano, did you have something else?
I can only speak for myself, but I don't necessarily need thousands and thousands and thousands of pages to read. However, I would like Cliff Note versions, at least some sort of verbal update or some sort of communication to make the decision of the what. That's my only opinion, though. So,
Okay.
as I've stated before in other meetings, I feel that I have not been given that, and I feel blind in certain circumstances, if I said that correctly.
Yeah,
I hear you, but that doesn't represent how I feel.
Yeah, and we can have differences of opinion.
Absolutely.
You know, and
Right.
still go through there. Ms. Parker, did you have something?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with both of what you said. I don't think that I need every single memo that is sent to and from the school district staff about consolidation. However, when we talk about topics that are clearly highly contested and issues, I think it's important for me to at least have the option to see those. And yes, we were given them in the EIR, but I had no idea that letter even went out in July. And that's also because I'm not a school district employee. I'm not on ACTC. I'm not a traffic expert. I don't know these things. I drive my car around. That's what I do. So there is that. I do have a couple of questions and kind of concerns. Is that these intersections that we've discussed here, I've lived here for 33 years. I grew up here, went to Amador County schools, the whole 9 yards. Those intersections have been problems for 33 years, plus some. So I guess what I'm asking is why is it, and I understand that we have a new project coming in, this, that, and the other, but if there was such concern and now we have data we can see to back it up, why is it that all of a sudden now everyone is throwing up their hands like, oh my gosh, we have to fix something, when these have been issues and our students have been driving those roads for years and years and years and years. And I'm not saying that something should not be done, about any of this, but I think it's just interesting that all of a sudden now there's all of this public outrage about the roads and the safety and our students. I mean, I remember when I was at Amador High School, the bypass had just been put in, and I got in a really bad car accident in high school right there. Where's the outrage? I mean, this is what I'm talking about. So, and that's not to say that I don't feel that there are issues that 155% need to be mitigated. However, the issues perhaps should have been mitigated collaboratively amongst all the agencies a long time ago. We brought up Wicklow Way. That's been a dead end at Walmart since it was built, I don't know. And now we're bringing it up. So the district has responsibility, and I fully believe that, to mitigate safety risks for our students, 100%, especially high school drivers. Like, come on. But, and I think we've discussed this a little bit, and I'm interested to hear, and I hope we hear some of these ideas coming from ACTC, and Caltrans of what some of these ideas and what the fair share kind of mitigation strategies that we'll be using to work together to do this, because it's going to have to be a fair share. There's other government agencies that are also responsible for not only public safety but student safety as well, besides just the school district. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Mr. Crowe, did you have anything at this time?
I guess one comment, and I'll save the rest of my comments for after the district's consultant responded. You know, we're still in the review process, and it seems like the feeling of people is that we passed the review process and the district has neglected to do what we should have done. We're still in the process, so no one is, you know, this is not a final today or whenever the review period is over. That's not a final. It's a comment period. I'm expecting this to be part of a comment, but what I'm hearing is, well, the district's failing. Well, you know, that's part of the comment. So I'm not understanding why we seem to fast forward through the review process. And I will wait for after the consultant speaks before I have any comments.
I'll defer back to the consultants.
Well, one comment I just make is that we have a firm called Kittleson Associates that's doing the traffic analysis, a very reputable, large firm. And they are experts in this field. If they were here, they would have some arguments with you, and you know, together you guys could solve it. The other thing, just about traffic consultants, if we had 4 consultants here, we'd have 4 different opinions, to be honest, and you probably have experienced that. And so, yeah, I'm going to reiterate the fact that we want to work with everybody. Give us your comments. We'll work with Kittleson and work this out, and provide responses and make changes if it's necessary. But let us go through that process, because we're right in the middle of it right now.
Any other comments on the meeting?
I think there was discussion earlier about the Whitlock Way and the connection, and we did some research, and there were 2 resolutions, one dating back to 1986 and another one to 1994. The first one had to do with Kmart going in and the whole planned community with residential homes, and it was intended to go through, and it was part of the final map approval. And then it did not go forward. And then when Walmart came in, it appeared on the language in the resolution that was approved by the city that that would be connected, and then funds, traffic mitigation fees were collected, and the funds would be monitored for any potential future projects. There was a threshold of monitoring the vehicles per day, and when it got to 10,000 vehicles per day, then the discussion opened up where that road extension would take place. And the city or the planning, the county provided us the resolutions, and our understanding is we weren't sure what the status was. So if we could get an update of how that went through and how it was monitored to know, and if there's any residual funds in those funds that are available to contribute to any potential mitigation project.
I have one more question regarding the slideshow, just so I can understand what you presented here today. When you had mentioned analysis, is there like a industry standard on how people do analyses, or is it to the discretion of the analyzer?
That's why I was about to respond. You know, it isn't quite that 4 traffic engineers are going to give you 4 different answers. That's why Caltrans says everybody use the most commonly used thing, because to take that element out.
Right.
And so that at least everybody's doing traffic counts the same way, everybody's using the same software, so the subjectivity of it is taken out to some extent. Yes, there are industry standards. It's called the Highway Capacity Manual. That's how these calculations are done. It's done, approved by FHWA and is produced by them. So yeah, there isn't a standard. And like I said, that's why Caltrans says all over the state, this is what we want everybody to do, so that they can compare one project to another, and a study done this year to one done the previous year, and other things. That's the purpose of the standard.
Thank you.
You bring up the idea of using the same kind of software and the same kind of process in every project going through. I'd be interested, because I came up here in the fall of 1984, and when I did, at Argonaut High School, there was no Westview Estates there. There were no houses behind the fire station on Argonaut Drive that I think Mr. Reagan put in. Were those studied for impacts That's a question that I have.
Can I answer that?
No.
Is that okay?
No, public comment.
Comment.
You're saying were they studied for impacts, that would have been the responsibility of the Jackson Planning Commission in their approval of those projects.
Actually, that's her. Yeah.
Okay, I will go ahead and allow that.
Thank you. Susan
Not knowing who
Peters,
she-
planning consultant for the city of Jackson, and I've done it for, well, since the Reagan development came in 1995, 96. So that project, yes. So the way things work in terms of projects coming in and the analysis is that that project was a subdivision. It came in, it prepared the environmental documentation just like is being done here, identified impacts, and created mitigation. It demonstrated that it crossed some certain thresholds with respect to the intersection of Argonaut Lane and Argonaut Drive.
Okay.
So that developer was responsible, because he crossed that threshold, he was responsible for doing the updates to that intersection. That intersection changed after he put that subdivision in. He made it safer. And he also dedicated land to the fire department, and there was a bunch of other mitigations that he did as well. So what is, I think it's hard to understand is that he crossed those thresholds, but it was a project that was on the local list. So those that paid into the local mitigation fees, they also paid into that project. So that local fees covered portions of that project. So he only had to pay his fair share. So in doing that, he ended up paying more than his fair share. So there was an agreement with the city over time to pay him back as other development came in. That's how these things work. So Wicklow Way is another great example. Walmart going in there, and that was in the county, it's not in the city. Don't get me started on that. When Walmart went in, they didn't cross the threshold either, because there's no through traffic going past that. The traffic is on 88. So they didn't cross that threshold. Now, if the county, which now owns all that property around Wicklow, and they have a specific plan going, if somebody were to purchase that and develop that, then they cross that threshold and they have to pay their fair share to extending Wicklow Way. So the expansion of the high school, you have to pay your fair share. And if you cross that threshold, that needs to be done, and then all that other development that comes afterwards would pay the school district back. I'm simplifying a very complex process, but that's essentially how it works.
Good question.
Thank you, Susan.
To ride your coattail on that, was there an EIR on the county courthouse project? And was there traffic studies done on that? Because I mean, I'm thinking that is so in such close proximity to the school that I would think that there'd be, have been some kind of study for that.
I wasn't the planner then, I think.
Well, and it also was replacing the county offices building,
No,
so
it
from the
replaced Blue
standpoint
Shield.
of personnel,
Blue
Blue
Shield was there before.
after the county offices building. But
Yeah.
what I'm getting at, it was, the building has been office space, whether it be Blue Shield, courthouse, or county, since its original inception. So when it converted to courthouse, it wouldn't have been considered a new project.
If there was no traffic study done as far as the impact?
I wouldn't suspect so.
Because I mean, I would say, you know, going by there, that there's an awful lot of traffic that pertains just to the courthouse. And so I would think there'd be some kind of study, wondering if that was an impact to Hoffman and Argonaut Lane.
But especially the fact that when it was Blue Shield, they'd come to work, they'd stay at work, maybe go out to lunch. and leave at the end of the day. Whereas the courthouse, you'll have a lot more people coming in because Blue Shield did not have a lot of visitors coming in. Now you have people going to court, you have jury trials. I have seen that road where people have actually parked in school district parking lots out in front because they had jury duty over there. And the traffic through there definitely affected that. My question back is on the intersection of Argonaut Lane and 88.
Yes.
Was there any impacts done by either the Reagan project or by Westview?
So, yes, they, at that time, the Amador County Transportation Commission was just coming into being, and we were just in the beginning stages of setting up what's now known as the Regional Traffic Mitigation Fee Program. So there were impact analysis to that intersection. It didn't cross any thresholds. There wasn't a regional kitty collecting money at that point, I don't believe. It may have been about the same.
2003.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's in that area, but I honestly don't remember back that far if there was a specific analysis on that intersection. I do know that since the inception of the Regional Traffic Mitigation Fee Program, there has always been discussion about that intersection. The original idea was actually to have 49 punch through and go through the Kirkpatrick property and then connect with Argonaut Lane just north of the high school.
Yeah, just where they've been doing the.
And we were never able to get that to be a project that was considered by the county. So, you know, there's always been concerns with that intersection, and extension of Wicklow has been the secondary alternative to dealing with the impacts there.
Can I ask something going with that? I know this is going to be really hard for all of us, but if we could set consolidation aside for a second. I think one of my concerns is ACTC has on their website their transportation plan that was updated in 2020, and they currently give the 4988 Argonaut Lane intersection. At that time, they gave it a level of service greater than F. That does not consider consolidation whatsoever. And we have a high school that's existed there for more than 40 years. And so even if we weren't going to consolidate, are there any plans? Because Mr. Hubbard said a couple of things. He talked about the accidents, 38 of them at that intersection, 9 during the school day. I mean, I would pose, well, then there's 29 that have happened not related to school in the last 10 years. And repeatedly we've heard about how that intersection is a present safety concern. So if we aren't consolidating, let's say we didn't do that, what would be the plan for that intersection?
Can I answer that?
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. We asked Caltrans to do a safety investigation at that intersection in response to what was going on in the summer, actually in the spring of last year. And they produced a safety investigation. They did the research. They noted that there's some sight distance issues, some horizontal vertical curve issues, and they recommended some improvements. Some minor kind of baby step improvements of signage, replacement of signage, and improved motorist information. But they deferred any more detailed analysis to your traffic study, waiting for the information that they requested in the EIR to be produced back to them so they could do a more in-depth analysis. But there is a recognition that there are safety issues there. Can I finish? Can I finish, please?
Yeah.
So I'd like to follow up with what Susan mentioned about the fee program, how that all works, and the resolutions. Got the resolutions here. If anybody's interested in seeing the original Walmart and Kmart resolutions in 86 and 93, there is a threshold. You're right. I mean, there's a threshold in there. It's just about going to hit it. It hasn't quite hit it yet, and that's when that will trigger that next set of improvements. I worked with Chuck Beatty, the county, to look into the money that was submitted into that program. Again, 93. ACTC started their fee program in 2003. And at the time, we received beginning balances from the jurisdictions. The county sent us a check for $971,000 as a beginning balance. Still trying to kind of break down what that funding represented. But we're assuming some of that 971 included fees from the Walmart development and other projects in the area. So as Susan mentions, the fair share contribution has been accumulating for these improvements over the years by various developers. In our RTMF program, and I have copies for you if you'd like to see how we've distributed the funds over the years, there's 3 significant projects in this area that RTMF fees have gone to, which would include the funding that we received from the county for the Walmart development. Sutter Street Extension has been under development for a long, long time. The City of Jackson has recently brought that project to shovel-ready construction, which would extend Sutter Street to the Hoffman at an intersection roundabout is being planned. Right? So far, we spent $1.1 million of fee money developing that project, which would be, fortunate for you, mitigation for your impacts. We've also spent $118,000 over time studying the Argonaut Lane State Route 88 intersection. We had a consultant back in the day develop conceptual plans in the case that this project was moving forward in recognition of fees having been paid in the area. The third one is the Wicklow Way extension. Supervisor Plass was instrumental in making sure that funding was programmed to the county to begin planning for the Wicklow Way extension, and we allocated $284,000 to the county out of our fee program to begin developing that project. So I just wanted to make sure that you understand that.
Can you also point out that the Wicklow Way extension project has always been on our Table 5 list, and it has been stated as developer funded? Hasn't been state monies or whatever going to that. It was developer funded in the anticipation of development of that area.
Thank you. That's such a critical point.
It's not a subdivision development now, it's a school project.
Because Dr. Critchfield mentions that it's love Critchfield.
No, Doc.
So Jared, level of service F. That is a representation of 20 years of expected growth. That's what the RTD does. It takes a look at 20 years of population employment growth in the region, and we ran a traffic model to estimate future traffic that could occur from that growth. And we disperse the growth just as an estimate of where we think that growth will occur based on general plan zoning maps and things, our best guesses. So Argonaut Lane, with 20 years of growth, it's going to fail. It's in there. Existing, not so much. And I think that's validated by the Caltrans traffic study. They're saying we can fix it, we can take some minor fixes to that location. We can change some signage locations and maintain an adequate service at that intersection. They did a safety analysis. If they saw a real failure there, they would have a liability to do something. They did something, minor improvements. With your project, it goes to F. With your project, it has an 880-foot queue on the northbound turn movement. That's your project, not existing conditions.
But I appreciate what you're saying, but statements were made today about it being a current safety concern.
I just said that.
Right. So again, if consolidation weren't happening,
they put some signage in to help drivers navigate the intersection better. No, still flow adequately. All right.
I was looking online, I saw the City of Jackson circulation element from November 2008. It had several implementation measures. One was for the Martel, it was under the Martel and sub-regional traffic mitigation fee. It listed fees were collected for a signal at 88 and Argonaut Lane, and this was in 2008. So does this mean that at that time period they were looking at installing a light there?
What are you referring to? Can we see that?
On the City of Jackson's website, it has a report, the circulation element report from November of 2008. says one of the objective 2A, minimize traffic and congestion in Jackson. And it references implementation, Measure 28, Marshall Area Subregional Traffic Mitigation Fee. It lists the Sutter Street Extension Project. It lists a signal at 88 in Argonaut Lane, a signal at 88 in Wicklow Way. So this is 2008, so I'm just wondering, was this something that was in consideration back then?
Oh, absolutely.
So we're 16 years later, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering what has been done, or is there any progress or anything that's...
I just mentioned the progress, but the circulation element for the city of Jackson is a implementation component of the environmental impact report that the city of Jackson does for its general plan. So the general plan, much like the RTP, projects out future conditions 20 years out in the future, and it develops a planned circulation system to accommodate expected growth. And that, again, is one of the areas that if growth occurs in 20 years, the way the City of Jackson zoning maps allow, the impacts will be such that there may need to be improvements at the Argonaut State Route 88 intersection, maybe a signal.
And I've read on there, there was an underpass or overpass for pedestrians and bikes. I can't remember the other ones. I looked at it just a couple days ago.
But Susan is here. Susan was the planner for the City of Jackson for many, many years, and she's well versed in general plan law.
So I just want to state, yes, everything you said is correct. Those were the plans. We do have a new circulation element. Apparently, it's not up on our website yet. The City of Jackson just did a wholesale update of their whole general plan, including the circulation element. So that information and was reflected in your draft environmental impact report as well. Your consultants picked up on that. But it does demonstrate that we recognize those safety concerns, and that we've been doing things to try to mitigate it in the future as funds become available. And Sutter Street Extension is a great example. The signalization of Sutter Street was a huge thing for the City of Jackson to get that, because we had a lot of issues out there, and that became a shop project under Caltrans. So the city we only had to contribute a little bit to that. Caltrans did the heavy lifting with the expense to that, and that was a great thing, and that made it so that we could shift monies to the Sutter Street Extension. So by the Sutter Street Extension, the idea is to get that traffic off of Hoffman. So the Caltrans letter that was just submitted in response to your DEIR indicates that the Hoffman intersection with what they call Sutter Street, which is Highway 49, is now meets with your project, meets signal warrants. If Sutter Street were to be extended like we've been planning on doing, and we've been spending money, and it is a shovel-ready project, that would alleviate that need for that signal at Hoffman and 4988, because then the traffic would be pushed down Sutter Street to an already signalized intersection. So the participation in the fees and the participation with getting Sutter Street Extension alleviates a significant impact, a safety impact to everybody in that area. And that's not something we've been ignoring. That's something that's been in our general plan for almost 30 years.
Right, Susan, this is before the project, so we're ahead of the game on that.
Is that Sutter Street Extension, is that planned to happen this year?
No, we're looking for construction funding currently.
Do you have an estimated cost on that project?
Well, the last time we looked at it, I think it was $8 million, and that was probably $2019, so go up.
Yeah, a lot.
Does that include the roundabout?
Yes, that includes the roundabout.
Okay.
There was a reference to the light in the slideshow, and the accidents and fatalities. We have
The light?
the Sutter street light or the traffic light. So we have that in place, and we have accidents, and we had a fatality. What do we do if that's going to be a main focus for eventually where kids are going to be going up to school? It doesn't seem like the light fixed anything.
I don't think the fatality was at the light.
I think it was up higher up by,
Well, I mean, that's what the presentation said,
Yeah.
the fatality at
Within
that location.
Yeah, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think because it happened up maybe by fast gas, it's attributed to that traffic light.
Closest to that, yeah.
That's the closest intersection, so therefore it might be a cause of it, and that's just a rough guess on my part.
So I'm wondering, out loud, do we have a light and we're having problems, so what are we gonna do at Argonaut? I mean, we already have the problems. Where do we go from here?
Sir.
If I can bring this in. There's degrees of problems. You're never going to solve all the problems of traffic.
Right.
It's human behavior. There's going to be certain things. The reason why a traffic signal is so helpful is if you have a situation where you have a stop-controlled intersection, so the side street has a stop, and you've got a high-speed road, people going more than 40 miles an hour, 50, 60, whatever. It relies on the person that's on that side street to gauge whether or not the gap in traffic is good enough. And so if you're an experienced driver, it's still going to be iffy. If you're an inexperienced driver, it's much worse. Okay, if you're an inexperienced driver that's been waiting in a queue of 40 cars and you've been stuck in there for half an hour and your friends are saying, we're going to be late or something, then what's an acceptable gap shortens considerably. Okay, so that's the danger. The danger is if you have a stop-controlled intersection, if that same intersection was signalized, you'd get a green light. You'd know when it was safe to cross. That's the point. A signal gives you a safe interval to travel past conflicting traffic. And so in Sutter Street, my guess is we got a certain number of accidents. My guess is if it wasn't signalized, that number would have been higher.
What was the threshold you used for accidents? Within what distance from the intersection? Because the fatality that was listed occurred, I believe that was almost near where Bowmanville Road comes out.
Which is fast gas.
Okay, so that's a pretty good distance from that intersection. So I'm just curious, when we talk about the 38 accidents up here, the 19 down here, like what distance from those intersections are you considering an accident that's attributed to the intersection?
We pulled that from the Switters database. That's filled out by the officer who's investigating the accident. So it's only reported accidents. There may be other accidents that were not reported. If the officer says it was associated, it could have been a car slowing down, or accelerating or decelerating, or something else associated with that, maybe some distance from the intersection. But if the officer who investigated the accident put down it's related to that intersection, then that shows up. That's how it's done.
So it could be a long ways from the intersection and the accident
and still have
could
it
be attributed to the
attributed.
intersection. Okay, I just want to make sure I understand.
Is there a ballpark figure for how much a traffic light costs?
A lot.
A lot is not a number. I'm just wondering, are we talking 8 million, 10 million, 20 million? Do we have any idea?
Depends on the location, depends on the right-of-way required, depends on the environmental analysis required, depends on the geometrics of the intersection. It's hard to put a ballpark on it. It's a lot of money.
My understanding is that it's cheaper than the roadway though, by far.
And do we know how much it cost to put in the Sutter Street light?
We don't have Caltrans.
And that was a Caltrans
here.
shop project.
Yeah, we could follow up with Caltrans and do some info, or you can follow up with Caltrans for the meeting with them.
So I guess my question here is, we're all sitting here talking about this, what is it that is being asked of the school district? I know I saw your guys' the general, the broad, but what are the proposals here? What are we doing?
Very simple, and we've touched on it. Don touched on it, I think Susan touched on it, and COE in his comments, that you've included the analysis that Caltrans and ACTC requested, absent the queuing that Don specified. You've included the LOS, They requested a little bit more in the comment letter that you received, that your staff received on the 24th. That information should not be in an appendix. That, now that you know, as Cody mentioned, you're well aware of these impacts, that should be in the body of the document as pursuant to the requirements under CEQA, that you have a requirement to study safety impacts in the document. In the Caltrans letter they sent you on the 24th, they reiterated that and said they want you to see that analysis in your project proposal, in the EIR, in the body, not in the appendix. That's all. That's all we're asking. And in that way, as Jared mentioned at the board meeting, he mentioned that you had done some fair share stuff. I don't see it in there. But in that way, you could actually work with agencies, other responsible agencies, to develop fair share contributions to whatever mitigation fix is appropriate. Maybe it's not a signal at Argonaut. Maybe it's some minor geometric improvements at Argonaut. Maybe it's a frontage, improvements on a frontage road. Maybe it's the Wicklow Way extension. We need to meet at a staff level with your traffic consultant, our traffic consultant, and staff. Chuck Beatty and Richard are here. They'd be perfect to meet with such an agenda to look at what is appropriate to mitigate the impacts that you've disclosed in your document, in an appendix. That's all we're asking.
So all you're asking is that the letters and the such from the appendix are moved to the body of the document at this point. Is that what you're asking?
And studied appropriately for
Yes,
appropriate
well, yeah.
mitigation. Yes.
I just want to throw this out there. In my spare time, I work as a civil engineer, and so I'm speaking for myself, but I'm pretty certain that the entire school board would not proceed with any project that would put the public at public safety at risk. And so I just want to make a point that no one on the board side that I know of is trying to circumvent any issues. No one is trying to keep the public in the dark about anything. I've had conversations with some of the people in this room, and I keep telling them, ask me questions, come to the board meetings, and keep firing off your concerns. So I just want to put that up. I have another question. I was watching the Board of Supervisors meeting from 1/9/24, where that Pine Grove Corridor project is put on the hold. And
you're out.
My favorite. And so, there was quite a few discussions about, school safety, dangerous for the kids, and it looks like what the position is, the bids came in high. I'm wondering what, it said online, the budget was like 14.4 million. I didn't find out how much that's been spent on it yet. Bids came in, I think, under 10, and those are too high, so that's pushed off. So I'm just wondering, it's a safety concern, but then it's being pushed off. So, what's the story there? How is that going to be addressed? Because we have our school there. That's part of the consolidation. It's not being consolidated with anyone, but we still have a lot of kids that go there. There's going to be traffic issues. They're backing up in 88, and it's a concern.
And before I let him, I understand that intersection is from Ridge Road to Taboo Road is currently graded an F traffic area, according to the ACTC report.
Again, the RTP that projects out 20 years out into the future. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Currently.
You have a section that talks about current efficiencies, though, not just the projected efficiencies.
Yeah,
There's
okay.
a whole
And
section.
it's
that
under the
talks
current
about
efficiencies as being an F.
Yeah.
efficiencies.
So that project's,
Yeah, it's also a state highway, and the safety concerns are as a result of inadequate infrastructure of the school districts for their parents to be able to pick up and drop off kids. And that project proposes to spend a significant portion of the money allocated to that project to fix the school's created problem. So I'm not sure you want to go down the road of who's appropriate to spend their money on these fixes, because there has to be some participation from the project.
Well,
When
it's
causing the
that project's been in the plan according to the discussion 20 years, 16 years, and, you know, I've never seen anything where the school's been brought into any discussions about that. I know that,
The school included and decided and did not participate.
That's not true.
That's not true.
No funds, no funds, no.
I can speak to that.
Okay.
In 2008,
No.
in 2018, I was approached by Caltrans and Mr. Vila about that project. The board actually passed a resolution and sold a strip of the property in front of Pine Grove Elementary to Caltrans. And the information that we received from Caltrans was that the project would be moving forward. So I take exception to saying we're not a
That
participant.
we sold a portion of the property?
Yes.
Yes.
So you received revenue from a sale of property?
Correct.
And that's a contribution to the project, you think?
No.
No.
That was Caltrans wanting part of our property to move forward with their project. I met with Caltrans and Mr. Vila, so, I mean, you can say we weren't engaged, but we were fully engaged with Caltrans in that project.
Well,
They
we
said they would be
did reach out to the school district.
Well before that.
Well before, and the
That
school
was right
district
away
declined.
acquisition, and all property owners
Yeah.
along that corridor.
Okay, well, I started my role in 2017. I'm just saying that
Okay.
my first interaction on that intersection was 2018.
Yeah.
And we fully engaged with Caltrans. And then they said it's going to take a few years because they're in planning and all that, but they wanted to make sure that in their plans that they could have that portion of our property to make that whole area safer. And so
Okay,
again,
so let me address the
engaged.
specific question that the board member Crowe raised. That project is still being pursued. There is a funding shortfall right now. It started as a much larger project on the order of 70 billion as a bypass. It's been ratcheted down to 40 million as an improvement through the existing alignment. And now it's really just an operational fix at the Volcano Road intersection, a proposed signal, a better crossing at the town hall. And we're trying to find the additional funding to keep that project alive. When we ratcheted it down and phased it and chose that initial middle section of the project, Caltrans requested us to do a supplemental traffic study to verify that it still had independent utility and met the purpose and need for the original idea. And they validated that it would only if we added an egress road from the school to Volcano Road. That was a kind of a last minute addition to the project. Again, a benefit to the school to help you with your safety problem there. So the project really is only focused on safety at that intersection and really primarily to address the school's safety problem.
well, I've read in the reports about, bicycle and pedestrian plans in the general plan, and, when you go through Pine Grove, it's all, there's no sidewalk, so it's basically impossible to walk anywhere, and I'm not sure anyone would want to walk anywhere that close to the highway, but, we've had, I recall in the EIR, there's the bicycle plan, pedestrian and bicycle plan, and there's really aren't any. I recall 7, 8 years ago, there was discussion of a bike trail plan, and I haven't heard what happened with that, if that's just been put on hold, or if it's still in planning, or what's going on with that. That's just, I'm not asking you, I'm just making a general statement that, that's another thing that, trying to lower the amount of vehicles going to the school, and it mentions, sidewalks, pedestrian walkways, bicycle paths, and there aren't any. And I know there's a plan, but
Well, just to tag on here, Jared says he's been dealing with it since 2018. When I came on the board, one of the things that was brought to us was the sale of that property, and I came on the board in 2020. And Mr. Marzano, I do believe, was on the board at that same.
I remember a couple of briefings.
And Ms. Parker and Mr. Crowe were obviously not on the board, so they weren't there to see it, but we were told at that time that it was, the land was in exchange for getting a different route going down to the Pine Grove Volcano Road over there.
I believe that's your district, but.
It's our district.
No,
because
it's your
we're
district. I believe that there are a few sidewalks, but doesn't really fix anything, but there is.
Yeah, where on 88 and Grove that are sidewalks.
There's one right there crossing Volcano Road. There's
That
one.
crosswalk goes to a sidewalk.
Yeah.
In front of the Guy's Saw Center.
Right.
And I remember people getting hit in the crosswalk by the town hall with the flashing light, because I was at a fire meeting at that time, and we had to respond from the station to the other side of the lot, you know, and so people go flying through there, even now.
Well, and that's why we probably should collectively recognize that signalization at Argonaut and 88 on the state highway is not a fix any more than sidewalks and bike trails on a state highway is a fix for students going to school. I mean, it's not an appropriate fix. You're still going to have the speed of traffic on the highway and impacting that intersection. And you've done nothing about the increase, and I'm not saying you, the school district, we collectively have done nothing beyond the intersection. And look at Argonaut Lane between the intersection and Argonaut High School, and how many backyards and front yards are going to have to be acquired through right-of-way and condemnation proceedings to make that a passable roadway. So, I don't know, we seem to be focusing on that intersection, and to Cody's point and others' point, there's a lot of intersections impacted by this consolidation project as a whole, not just in Jackson, Sutter Creek, or Ione. So, I don't know, I just hear us focusing on a light at the intersection and what does it cost and so forth as some sort of fix to these safety impacts, and you're going to find it to be woefully inadequate of a safety fix.
Well, I know I did a tour of Ione Elementary last week, and it wasn't during drop-off or pickup, but I saw cars double parked, and I just imagine that it's a total nightmare to get in and out of there during the pickup and drop-off. So Ione's a problem. Even getting onto Highway 88 from Ione is probably a problem on this east end of Ione.
I would imagine.
Mr. Whitaker, could I offer,
Sir.
We have just limited time here today, just as a solution moving forward. Commissioner Plass is exactly right, that Argonaut Lane may not be the solution. We've kind of got experience that signal projects on the state highway can be daunting. But what we do have is impacts from the proposed project, and our traffic consultant, Don, has identified, or looks at the turning movement information that you presented in your appendix, and he also has identified a potential flaw in the analysis where the future projection of students is not distributed properly, that it was distributed based on the portion of current traffic movements. So you have so many people going into Argonaut Lane right now, you have so many people going into Hoffman right now, but in the future, you're going to have new students coming from the Sutter Creek area. Most of them are going to try to go to Argonaut, right? That's going to be the closest spot for them to go to. But you've distributed those future trips just as though they were existing. So there's a flaw in the analysis itself. But the starting point, I think that would be great for us to get to, is a staff level get together with our traffic consultant and yours to look at those assumptions and come to an agreement. And I think two traffic engineers in the same room could come to an agreement on what the numbers should be on those intersection turning movement diagrams. And once you have an agreement there, then you go to Commissioner Plass's point. You know, is it too onerous to try to fix it all there right at the intersection? Or are there other potential mitigation possibilities like the Wicklow Way extension? Would that be able to take some of that impact off of the Argonaut Lane intersection and other potential remedies? Right?
I think so,
yes.
And I would like to go into that further because, you know, you're saying flaw. We presently have our, as Mr. Gold pointed out, our largest student population already goes to Argonaut High School. So those student drivers are presently accounted for in the impact. There are fewer students in the Sutter Creek and Plymouth area than there are in Ione. So when we project, you can't just project that it's going to be equal to what's currently going on with the distribution of students.
But that's what you've done.
Okay, but I'm just saying that we have to work together on looking at the fact that we have I-own students that already attend Argonaut High School, and those traffic impacts are already there.
Right.
So we can't say every new student is impacting Argonaut Lane without recognizing the students that are already using Argonaut Lane.
Absolutely, George, if I could follow up with that. You have great maps that show exactly where students live currently and what schools they go to, right?
Correct.
So you're right, some of the students that I own already go up to Argonaut, they're gonna take Argonaut Lane. But the new ones, you know where they are. You know the new students in the Sutter Creek area, where they're gonna come from, right? So you can't just rely on the existing proportion. You can't just distribute them based on existing percentages at the intersections. You have better data. You have mapping data that tells you exactly how many students you have from the Sutter Creek area that are gonna come. And I can guarantee you it's not gonna be distributed according to existing turning movements. It can't be. You know that. Your mapping tells you that.
I certainly suggest, that you submit the comments, submit your presentation, let us work with our traffic consultants to provide responses, then we come back to the district and start the process of our response and move forward in that manner. If we have to make changes, we'll do that. If we have disagreements, we'll explain that.
Right. But I guess our position is we're a government agency. You're a government agency. We're spending a lot of money on our traffic consultant, on our legal counsel, to try to discuss this and give you our reasonable and educated opinion on what's going on. And for you to continue down the process as you propose, I understand you extended the opening day another year, but you're still considering adoption of the EIR, maybe with a month delay. It doesn't sound to us like you're really listening to any of our input. And just to avoid additional expense, public agency to public agency, is there a different way we could approach this? That's all we're asking.
Well, again, I'm going back to my first statement, this is part of the review. All these agencies are supposed to provide their comments. There's nothing that's been decided as far as my participation on the school board of, we're going to disregard what the commission or the transportation commission thinks, what the city's think, the county. We're going to consider we're there, we're considering it. I'm not sure where it's coming from that the EIR is disregarding anyone. It's comment time. You disagree with what is in the EIR. Now's the time to get that to the consultants, and so that it can be presented to the board and we can go over it.
Yeah, I can weigh in, and I'm sure my colleague from Lozano can weigh in as well. I understand you guys had a presentation on the CEQA process just a few weeks ago, and typically this is the point in time, even though it's called a review process, there's this back and forth. This is the point in time where there's an opportunity to actually bring in ideas and get that sort of text in the EIR. So the draft EIR that's prepared right now is substantially what the final EIR is going to be. In my experience, the final EIR takes all the comment periods, and as the gentleman from PlaceWorks explained, their responsibility is to respond to all those comments. And so in the spirit of collaboration, and as John pointed out, public agency to public agency with limited opportunities, we just wanted to bring this forward now to hopefully have a more collaborative experience rather than just kind of the formal attorney letter to traffic consultant, like get the work done here. Everyone come together.
So I want to just comment on that exact statement, because it's been stated multiple times in public that the school district has not come to the table with ACTC, and that is not correct at all. As a matter of fact, we were requested to attend an ACTC meeting, of which Mimi Dean and Mr. Critchfield and I attended. We also were requested to have a meeting. We met actually in this room. A couple of the members here from both staff and the commission were actually at that meeting. Mr. Critchfield has had multiple conversations privately with Mr. Gedney through the process as we were gearing up for CEQA and the EIR. So the district, I just want to make this very, very clear, because what I don't want to continue to happen is for the comments to be made publicly that we are not willing to come to the table. We are willing to come to the table. We are willing to do our part. We are willing to pay our fair share. We've never said that wasn't the case. I just no longer want to hear that we're not willing to participate when we have participated the entire time. And for people to stand in public and say otherwise, I'm not going to sit and be quiet any longer about it. So we are definitely willing to have an additional meeting with just staff. I think it would be helpful to have our traffic consultants meet with us so that we can move forward and try to come up with a productive solution. Obviously, we're well aware that the light there is extraordinarily difficult, right? Caltrans it's just difficult when you have to work with other agencies. So, and the time, and we understand that the time is of the essence. We do want to make it safer for our kids. It's currently not safe. We are well aware of that. The presentation today shows that our kids currently driving through those intersections currently have a safety hazard. So the question of the school district, back to ACTC or anybody, I don't even care, it's not even about ACTC at this point. It's about what are we collectively, and I appreciate what John made one statement, and it's the first time I've heard any person make this statement other than me probably behind a closed door is, this isn't a your agency, or the school district's problem. This is all of our problem. This is something that has been ignored for decades, and it's no one's fault. But we have to fix many things throughout our county, not just our roads. I think we're well aware of that. So I just want to make it very clear that the district is willing to come to the table. Mr. Critchfield and I and our consultants or whoever we need to have there, 100% are all in to improve our roads and to make this better, because our number one concern is educating our kids. And in order to do that, consolidation is the answer, unfortunately, both financially and educationally for our kids. But we need them to also be safe.
Tori, do you need any direction from the board members here to facilitate getting the consultants together? Or is that something that we have already given you?
You've already given us.
Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to make that public comment. So I think at this point, unless anybody, I don't want to stop the conversation by any means, but I also know that we're short on time, so I don't know if there's anything else across the room of those of us at the table, but I think it would be great if John and Jared and I can figure out, who to have at the table again, when we want to do that. I would probably say sooner than later, before that closure time, because we do want to get that input and come up with some of those, ideas so that we can work on that with our team.
I think we have most of the people that would want to be meeting in this room. We could all look at calendars.
Yes, let's do that. When we close.
Out, get some ideas.
That'd be great.
So that, I say we do that. Let's look at calendars.
Yeah.
And make the agenda that slide. As a rough, so we have at least a focus of conversation.
Sure, yeah.
Can we get that email posted as well?
It's in the board packet. I uploaded it.
So is other agenda?
I uploaded it when I got
Have
here.
something else, but those are the points we'll look at.
So
Okay.
totally agree as we're getting close up here. That's great. Your schedule kind of dictates how we meet, because you're still planning on bringing the draft EIR for approval now at your April meeting. Is that correct? So between now and then is the opportunity to have that discussion, as Olivia mentions.
Yeah, and I think my understanding is the goal of that meeting is to come up with, we don't have to have a fight of the traffic consultants, but to come up with some sort of middle ground and then some sort of maybe performance standards as well as ideas. And those can all be plugged into the actual final EIR so that we all are on the same page about our possible, let's say, forks in the road or avenues we could take.
At the danger of disagreeing with our legal counsel, I do want to get in the weeds with the traffic consultants. I think what we want to do is have a focused discussion on the traffic analysis, come to an agreement on those distribution percentages that Don pointed out. So the traffic consultants need to agree on those distribution percentages, agree on the turning movement diagram counts at that meeting. And then we need to have a discussion. Are we going to start discussing potential mitigation measures to address the impacts that the traffic consultants agree on, right? And then are you also amenable to including those mitigation measures in your draft EIR?
I don't think we'll know that until we get
Yeah,
down that
let me-
road.
But as
Respond a
a
little bit.
result of the discussion today,
That's a
is there an
question of the board,
acknowledgement
too.
that you have a
But you wanna see
requirement under
that EO or
CEQA?
EIR.
I'm sorry, what's that, John?
I like your question there, and my hamster's spinning, and it is regarding to Dr. Gibson's comment to Mr. Whitaker's question of, do you need direction from the board for something new? That's what I'm gonna consider this whole thing, is something new moving forward. And she said, no, I already have it. What were you referring to?
Just us, our staff and ACTC staff with our consultants meeting.
With traffic consultants.
Yeah.
You know, do we need to say, we want you to get together with ACTC and the traffic consultants to work out the
Right.
That's what
issues?
we would really appreciate, a real strong direction from the board to your staff, kind of acting as as the lead agency now. You're not acting as the developer, you're acting as the lead agency. And I'd like to know if you acknowledge our presentation that you have a requirement under CEQA to study the safety impacts in the document, not in an appendix. Is there an acknowledgement by the school board?
I'm gonna have our,
On that?
I'm gonna have
I mean,
our.
so as Dwayne said, I think he mentioned that safety is in the draft EIR, so I'm gonna let him talk to that
In
piece.
the appendix of the EIR.
Dwayne, would you like to speak?
No, it's not only in the appendix, it's the LOS analysis that's in there. You know, maybe one global thing is our differences in how to approach CEQA. Despite that, we can still solve issues. And whether it's within, you're arguing that you want it in the EIR so that you can have required mitigation. You know, we have an argument about whether that's appropriate or not, but that doesn't mean we can't come to an agreement as to what the solutions are in terms of these issues that everyone has talked about. So let's, one way or another.
But it's
we can
binding.
do that.
Don, just can I follow up real quick on that? And so please hold that thought. It's binding in an environmental impact report. And Mimi mentioned the resolutions for Walmart and Kmart. They weren't done through just people getting together and just because they think it's the right thing to do. It was done under an environmental impact report process.
Which predates 743, of course. I mean,
It's an environmental impact report process that gets these binding commitments.
Well, again, I mean, we have these arguments, but again, there's nothing there that precludes us in coming up with solutions that the district and the other agencies can agree to.
Can I defer to Don here?
I would let it, give us just a little bit of time for our traffic people to take a look at that. And maybe it's 2 weeks, I suppose, and then have, if the board chooses, then have that meeting. Then we'll have,
You want 2 weeks for you to consult with your traffic consultants?
Well, we only got this yesterday, I believe. Our traffic consultants haven't seen it. And so let's let them take a look at it, respond to it, and have a
We're gonna
chance.
schedule a meeting between staff. is
Well,
what
it's
we're
not
doing.
useful unless we have some data, we have a formal direction to discuss that won't be fruitful. So if you need 2 weeks to talk to your traffic consultants, Don, you're ready, right?
Well, I'll say, we're happy to work with you guys. We do it on a professional level all the time. This is not unusual. I will say, I have not done a safety analysis of these intersections. So I haven't done it. We're asking it to be done. And that does take some time, and probably Kittelson's going to do it with help from our input and to make sure that it's done properly. But, so I'm not presupposing the results of that analysis. The whole point is the analysis has to be done. It may find there's impacts at certain places, it may find there isn't. So I don't want to say that I'm going into this with some preconceived notion. Well, let's let the analysis happen between my company and Kittleson, find out what the results are, and see if we can identify some mitigation measures.
So we need to do that, but we need to do that first. We need an acknowledgement that that needs to be done and have it done, and then we can meet. And if you don't agree that you have a requirement under CEQA, I guess I think you do, but we all think you do. But if you still think you don't, that's going to be an issue that we're going to have to continue to argue. But for us to have a staff level discussion on appropriate mitigation, we have to have that done. So however long it takes you
But
to
it still
get
has
that
to come
data.
back to the board, on the mitigations to approve that afterwards. And I have a problem saying, we're gonna follow the mitigations when we don't know what those mitigations are. That's my own
So
personal.
we need to meet as we've agreed, which I think we've decided that after this meeting, those of us involved in that meeting will stay. And we will get our calendars and we'll get that meeting scheduled as soon as possible when we know that our team will be ready, and that'll happen as soon as we possibly can.
Okay.
We don't want to delay it.
No.
The meeting of getting it.
Just, we'd like to have this focused a little bit more, not another format like
Yeah.
this where it's kind of free flow. We want to
Agreed.
focus on the issue.
Agreed, and that's what I said earlier, that we were willing to do.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
I just want to mention, and, you know, Kittleson did your traffic engineering stuff, and I read through that appendix, and I'm a little bit concerned, you know, they didn't consider the Caltrans recommendations on the software to analyze your intersections or do a queuing analysis. I saw numerous errors in their descriptions of elements of the traffic system. It's minor stuff. You know, for example, saying Hoffman Street starts at downtown in Jackson on a highway and ends up down at Buena Vista Road. Well, Hoffman Street ends at Argonaut Lane, and it turns into Stony Creek Road. That's pretty simple. We all understand that. Your consultant didn't understand that. He refers to a Highway 41, which is nowhere near this area. I think he meant 104. It's things like that that puts question into someone who's looking at this document. If the consultant really is flushing through, you know, it puts into question, is the rest of the information good? You know, the request in my letter for the note of preparation is to look at Wicklow Way. I'm not saying that's the answer. It may be thrown out. I didn't even see the word Wicklow Way in the document. Now, I didn't read the whole document. I was just focused on transportation stuff. You know, it'd been nice to say, yeah, we looked at it. It's not feasible because of X, Y, Z, or it's the greatest idea since sliced bread. I don't know. It wasn't considered. So I have a concern that the approach that was taken by your traffic consultant seemed to be pretty narrow focused and narrow minded, and quite frankly, based on some of the simple stuff, I have a question of whether or not, you know, maybe they put their junior staff on it or something. I don't know, but it should have been a much better prepared document from them. And so when we have this meeting, I don't know about anyone else, but I'm going to, you know, kind of be a little bit wary or leery about, you know, what they're coming up with. So I don't know if that's a discussion you want to have with them. Maybe my comments are way off base. I'm going to take it for whatever they're worth, but that's.
I would appreciate getting those comments if you want to jot those down.
Yeah, that'll be. I've made comments, and you know, the comment letter will come from the county. Come from our county counsel's office, and I'm not sure how it's all going to be incorporated, but he has that information.
Very good.
I would hope that could happen soon, so we have the information
Sure.
to move forward in this. You know, so. Mr. Russo.
Jim, just wanted to just add there that in the EIR and in a lot of our discussion today, rightfully so, a lot of the conversation has been surrounded around you know, 88 and Argonaut and all that business. And I just want to remind folks that what's happening in Sutter Creek, and full disclosure, I live there. I live 2 houses down from where the cars show up and leave every day. So I see the queuing problems up there. I see the folks double parking. My wife literally goes out and tries to manage traffic on an ongoing basis so that kids don't get hurt darting across the street in front of cars that are parked on the wrong side of the street because they have nowhere else to park. That's today. So with the additional 180 kids coming up from downtown to the elementary, and from the parent trips taking the kids to and from the junior high school, which is going to be different than the way traffic is today, right? Today, high school kids come and go throughout the day. It's all going to be at one time in the morning, and it's all going to be at the same time in the afternoon. All of this business needs to be attended to in our thoughtful process as we move forward here, because I can see that being a real problem.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rudin. That echoes what your city manager
Exactly.
is saying. So
Exactly.
we have received comment on that. It's a very to the point concern.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, that being said, I will call for adjournment in the meeting. And
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come
Yeah.
speak with you today. Thank you, board members, for accommodating us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.